How's it going, everybody? It's Young here, and welcome to a Metal Gear Solid movie news update. The following information comes from an interview that movie director Jordan Vogt Roberts did with website Collider, through which he shared some insight into what his goals are for the project. If you don't know who Jordan is, he's the director of the upcoming movie Kong Skull Island, and he's also helming the Metal Gear Solid movie, which is still in early pre-production stages. Many of the things he says in this interview are similar to some of the statements that he made during his interview with website We Got This Covered, which I detailed in my last video, but he also got a bit more in-depth in other aspects of the project this time around, so I figured this information is worth sharing with you guys. On the topic of the Metal Gear Solid movie, one of the first things that Jordan was asked was for an update on the project, and he had the following to say. Metal Gear Solid is probably the most important franchise to me on the planet. It is such a genius, idiosyncratic work, and being able to spend time with Hideo Kojima recently has been like a dream. He's the best and his whole team is the best. We're working on the script. That is a property that I will fight tooth and nail to make sure is done properly, because it's so easy to screw it up and so easy for a studio to try and make it into G.I. Joe, or try to make it into Mission Impossible, or try to make it into something that it's not. Metal Gear Solid needs to be exactly what it needs to be, which is Metal Gear Solid. Jordan then discussed how, unlike many other franchises, whether it be comic books or even something like King Kong, which have undergone many iterations through dozens of writers who have worked on a version of the series over the course of decades, Metal Gear has had one vision and one voice throughout its entire existence. Here's Jordan's full quote on the matter. It's so interesting because unlike a comic book that's had 40 writers or 100 writers over the course of a decade or 2 decades or whatever, for decades now, Metal Gear Solid has essentially had one voice. So you're dealing with a highly specific property that's idiosyncratic to one persona and one persona's point of view and the way in which they interpret sort of culture and Western culture, and twist that back around into the super pure amazing property that has a tone that I think is unlike anything else that is out there. I actually think that when people see Kong, they'll realize like, oh, tonally, there are things that sort of line up with this, where this can be incredibly serious and dark and intense, or it can also be incredibly goofy and kind of take the piss out of itself and be slapstick at times, much like Metal Gear. Luckily, there are amazing producers on it, but that's a property that is so pure and important to my soul because it's something that I grew up on that I would love to shepherd into the film that it needs to be. I think it would be a massive film. I think it'd be an incredible film, but it needs to be done in a way that completely honors what Metal Gear is, because it's a classic and it's a seminal work not just in video games, but in media. Preach, brother, preach. The next topic of discussion was regarding the movie's rating, with the interviewer asking if it would go for a big budget PG-13 rating approach or for a lower budget R rating a la Deadpool or Logan, to which Jordan had the following to say. I think that for me, I want to make the version of the movie that is most true to what it needs to be. So if that is a Deadpool or Logan route where you go with a smaller budget and you're able to make it R, great. If you need to blow it out more and really get that bigger budget and go PG-13, I think it could exist in both avenues. There are hyper-violent parts to Metal Gear, but I would not necessarily call the hyper-violent part the core element of it versus like the tone and the voice and the philosophies that the characters exhibit. Those characters sort of are these walking philosophies, so I think nailing that part is far more important necessarily than thinking about the rating at this point, because right now we're just trying to get the best version of it. I think right now the more important thing is let's nail the voice, let's nail a story that makes sense. You look at the scope of the Metal Gear world and you go all the way back to the 60s and before that in the lore, and then you go to the more contemporary games in the near future and stuff like that. You're dealing with decades and decades and decades of characters. You're dealing with like, okay, how do Snake and Big Boss interact? How does Zero and all these other people interact with each other? How do you pick and choose the Cyborg Ninja and the Sniper Wolf and all these people and have them fit into a narrative that makes sense? This portion of the interview finally concluded as Jordan discussed what his ultimate goal is for the movie and how he wants Metal Gear fans in particular to watch the movie and go, "They did it." Here's his full quote. "So first and foremost, beyond thinking about budget, I want to find the version that someone like you, who's like a super fan of this property, would say, 'They did it. That's my Metal Gear, that's my shit.' Beyond it being a video game movie, beyond the difference between active experience and passive experience, and why people haven't been able to translate an active experience into a good passive experience in the shape of a film, beyond that question, to me it's not even about being a video game movie. Metal Gear is an important story, an important set of characters. So it just needs to be approached right now from how we nail that. And once we nail that, then budget questions will happen. Then those things will happen down the road. But right now, I'm just working with incredible producers and trying to make a version that you or a Metal Gear mega fan would be proud of and where people would be comfortable with that version to say, I know this is different, I know this is not exactly the way a normal movie might go, but this is very Metal Gear, and that is what will make random Joe Schmo in Nebraska who has no idea what Metal Gear is, that is what will make them fall in love with this franchise and with Solid Snake and these people. And that is what will make them say, beyond the nerdverse and things like that, who already accept this thing as super important, it's such a potentially massive thing that we're focused on getting that right first. So that's all the quotes from Jordan from the interview, and I must say, the more I hear this guy talk about the Metal Gear Solid movie, the more optimistic I feel about it. He actually talks like a Metal Gear fan and like a man who understands what makes Metal Gear so fundamentally unique. Like he said, it's not just some Mission Impossible video game knockoff. There is a very specific tone, voice, and vision that if you don't nail, it won't feel like Metal Gear. The fact that he understands this is already a huge step in the right direction. It's starting to feel like this might be a movie by a fan for the fans. I also love the fact that he isn't even thinking about budget or the movie's rating right now. He's working on nailing the tone, nailing the voice, and writing a script worthy of Metal Gear Solid so that everything else can be shaped around it. He also seems to be aware that you can't just directly adapt everything in the game into a movie format. Considerations like which characters fit, which ones don't, and how do they interact in such a way that they create a cohesive story and a narrative that makes sense are all ones that need to be made when compressing the dozen or so hours long game that is Metal Gear Solid into a 2 to 2.5 hours long movie experience. I'm also excited that Jordan is contemplating breaking the norm and doing things that a normal movie wouldn't do if it means that it will somehow service that Metal Gear feel, which might possibly be hinting that the movie will feature some Kojima-esque fourth wall breaking moments or goofy jokes that are untraditional in film. I would certainly be interested in seeing what Jordan can do in that regard, how he can translate some of the Metal Gear humor and quirkiness into a movie format and go for these untraditional elements by film standards, as long as it's not too on the nose or hammed in. Overall, everything that has come out of this man's mouth about the Metal Gear Solid movie so far has made me go, yup, this guy gets it. Now, keep in mind that even if his heart is in the right place, that won't necessarily guarantee that the Metal Gear Solid movie will be good. I've been burned one too many times by Hollywood's attempt at adapting works from other mediums, especially video games, even when the director's heart is in the right place. So I'm still going in with some trepidation when it comes to this movie. I really want this movie to be good, of course, but part of me also feels like Metal Gear in general just isn't a good fit for movies because it relies so heavily on a synergistic combination of cinematic storytelling and the video game medium's ability to directly interact with the player through gameplay mechanics and unique fourth wall breaking moments. These are both two sides of the same coin that contribute equally towards establishing Metal Gear Solid's identity. Not to mention that, like Jordan said, Metal Gear already has such a specific voice and tone and identity that recreating that in movie format will be a monumental task from a creative standpoint. but at least Jordan is aware of the risks and challenges that come with adapting something like Metal Gear Solid into a movie, and he seems to know what the hell he's doing. He seems to be a real fan of the Metal Gear series, he seems to understand it on a fundamental level, and his approach to tackling this project so far seems smart and seems to come from the right place, with the goal being to service the property and its fans before considering other elements. Something else that is worth noting is that Jordan has met with Kojima and team recently and is probably in constant contact with him, so that right there is a huge plus. If Kojima can provide some feedback behind the scenes, maybe there is hope yet for this endeavor. Who knows, maybe Jordan will find a way to surprise us and make a Metal Gear Solid movie that is solid in its own right and breaks movie traditions in all the right ways, like the Metal Gear Solid game did with video games. So, with all said and done, whereas before I had no hope for this project, after hearing Jordan speak, I am feeling cautiously optimistic. What are your thoughts on the Metal Gear Solid movie after hearing from Jordan? Do you think he has what it takes to make a solid adaptation, or do you expect another Hollywood video game adaptation that will fall flat on its face? Let us know in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things Metal Gear Solid, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out!